The Great Hall of New Geneva Space Station buzzed with excitement as hundreds of people filled every seat. Representatives from dozens of worlds had come to witness this special ceremony. The massive screen at the front showed images of distant stars and planets while soft music played in the background. Today was about honoring a hero. Commander Jake Morrison stood backstage adjusting his dress uniform for the third time. His hands shook slightly as he looked at himself in the mirror. 20 years had passed since that terrible day on Kepler 442b, but the memories still felt fresh. The burning buildings, the screams, the desperate faces of people begging for help. He pushed the thoughts away and straightened his shoulders. Ambassador Claire Rodriguez walked up to him with a warm smile. She carried a small wooden box containing the medal he would receive today. The Galactic Medal of Honor was the highest award any human could earn. Only 12 people in history had received it. "Ready for this, Jake?" she asked. Her voice was gentle, but he could hear the pride in it. "The whole galaxy is watching today. You represent the best of what humanity can be." Jake nodded but said nothing. He had given so many speeches over the years about duty and sacrifice. The words felt hollow. Now, he was tired of being called a hero when he knew the truth about what really happened that day. The ceremony began with a presentation about the Zephyrian War. The alien empire had swept across 3 sectors, destroying colonies and taking humans as slaves. Their technology was superior, and their warriors were ruthless. For 5 years they had pushed deeper into human space until the tide finally turned at the Battle of New Mars. But before that victory came many defeats. Kepler 442b was one of the worst. The mining colony had been home to 300 families when the Zephyrians attacked. The defense fleet was outnumbered 10-1. Most ships were destroyed in the first hour of fighting. The screen showed footage from that day. Jake watched himself as a young lieutenant piloting his damaged fighter through plasma storms. His ship was barely holding together, but he kept flying toward the colony surface. The crowd watched in silence as explosions lit up the sky around his small craft. Lieutenant Morrison received orders to evacuate high-priority personnel, the narrator explained. Despite overwhelming enemy fire, he managed to reach the colony and extract survivors before the facility was overrun. Jake closed his eyes. Priority personnel. That was the military way of saying they only saved the people who mattered to headquarters. Everyone else was expendable. The most famous image appeared on screen. Jake carrying a small girl through burning wreckage toward his ship. Her face was streaked with tears and ash. She clung to him desperately as laser fire erupted around them. This photo had appeared on news feeds across human space and became a symbol of their refusal to abandon their own. The courage shown by Lieutenant Morrison that day saved 300 lives, Ambassador Rodriguez said as she took the stage. He flew 7 trips through enemy fire to evacuate colonists. His actions represent the very best of human nature. We do not leave our people behind. The crowd erupted in applause. Jake felt sick. 7 trips. He had made exactly 1 trip. He had saved exactly 1 person. The little girl in the famous photo was the governor's daughter. Her name was Lisa Carter, and she was the only person his orders had told him to rescue. But the galaxy believed he was a hero. They needed heroes during the dark years of the war. So the military had created a legend around that single rescue mission. They claimed he had made multiple trips and saved hundreds of people. They said the other colonists had already been evacuated by different ships. It was all lies, but it gave people hope. Jake walked onto the stage as his name was announced. The applause was thunderous. People stood and cheered. Some had tears in their eyes. He saw alien delegates nodding with respect. Even former enemies honored his supposed courage. He accepted the medal and gave his prepared speech about duty and never giving up. The words felt like poison in his mouth, but he spoke them anyway. He talked about the brave colonists who had faced death with dignity. He mentioned the little girl who had trusted him to keep her safe. He said the things people expected a hero to say. But as he spoke, Jake noticed someone in the back of the hall. A young woman with striking blue eyes was watching him intently. She wore the uniform of a diplomatic advisor, but something about her seemed familiar. She was not applauding like everyone else. Instead, she just stared at him with an expression he could not read. The ceremony continued with more speeches and presentations. Military leaders praised Jake's long career and his continued service to humanity. Scientists talked about how his rescue mission had inspired new evacuation procedures. Politicians promised that no human would ever be abandoned like those on Kepler 442b. Each word made Jake feel worse. He had spent 20 years living with the guilt of leaving those people to die. The Zephyrians had taken them as slaves. Most had died in the work camps within a year. The lucky ones had died quickly, during the attack. After the formal ceremony ended, people began mingling and talking. Jake found himself surrounded by admirers wanting to shake his hand and take pictures. Everyone wanted to meet the famous hero of Kepler 442b. He smiled and nodded and said the right things, but his heart was not in it. The woman with blue eyes began walking toward him through the crowd. As she got closer, Jake felt a chill run down his spine. There was something about the way she moved that reminded him of someone. Her face was older now, but those eyes were unmistakable. She stopped in front of him just as he was shaking hands with Admiral Hayes. The conversation around them gradually died as people sensed something important was about to happen. Jake looked down at her and felt his world begin to crumble. "Hello, Commander Morrison," she said in a calm, clear voice. "My name is Dr. Lisa Carter. I believe we have met before." Jake Morrison felt the blood drain from his face as he stared at the woman before him. Lisa Carter. The little girl from Kepler 442b had grown up to become a confident young woman. Her blue eyes held the same intelligence he remembered, but now they also held something else: knowledge, purpose, and perhaps anger. Admiral Hayes noticed the sudden tension and stepped closer. Ambassador Rodriguez also moved toward them, sensing that something important was happening. Other people in the crowd began to quiet down and watch. The cheerful atmosphere of the celebration was changing into something heavier. "Dr. Carter," Jake said carefully. His voice was steady, but inside his heart was racing. "It has been a long time. You look well." Lisa nodded slightly but did not smile. She wore the uniform of a xenolinguist, which meant she worked with alien cultures and languages. Her posture was straight and professional. Everything about her suggested someone who had spent years preparing for this moment. 20 years, she replied. 20 years since you carried me out of that burning colony. 20 years since you became the hero of Kepler 442b. The crowd around them was growing larger as more people noticed the famous rescue victim talking to her rescuer. Someone had a camera recording their conversation. Jake could see the excitement on people's faces as they witnessed this reunion. "I have thought about that day many times," Jake said. He was trying to sound warm and caring like a hero should. "I am so glad you survived and built a good life for yourself." Survived. Lisa repeated the word slowly. "Yes, I survived. But what about the others, Commander?" What about the other 299 people who lived in that colony? Jake felt his stomach drop. Around them, the crowd was listening intently. This was supposed to be a happy reunion between a hero and the child he saved. But something in Lisa's tone suggested it would not be that simple. They were evacuated by other ships, Jake said automatically. It was the official story he had repeated countless times over the years. The whole operation involved multiple rescue teams. Lisa tilted her head slightly and studied his face. Her expression was that of someone who had just heard exactly what she expected to hear. Someone who was disappointed but not surprised. "Commander Morrison," she said, in a voice that carried clearly across the now silent hall. "You left them all to die." The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Gasps and shocked murmurs rippled through the assembled dignitaries. Admiral Hayes stepped forward quickly with his hands raised, trying to control the situation. "Dr. Carter," he said firmly, "you are obviously still traumatized by what happened. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." But Lisa ignored him completely. Her eyes never left Jake's face as she continued speaking. Her voice remained calm and clear despite the chaos she was creating. Commander Morrison did not save 300 colonists from Kepler 442b. He saved one person, me, and he did it by following orders to abandon everyone else to slavery and death. The crowd erupted in angry voices. People shouted denials and demanded explanations. Security officers began moving through the hall trying to restore order. Several human officials moved toward Lisa as if to escort her away, but she held up her hand. "I have proof," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The hall fell silent again. Lisa reached into her jacket and pulled out a small recording device. It was old and scratched, but still functional. Jake recognized it immediately. His legs felt weak, and he had to lean against a nearby table for support. That device had belonged to Lisa's mother, who had been the head of colonial operations. She had documented everything that happened during those final hours. "This contains my mother's final transmission from the Colony Communication Center," Lisa explained. "She recorded everything, including the military orders that Commander Morrison received that day." Ambassador Rodriguez tried to intervene. "Dr. Carter, these are serious accusations. If you have evidence, it should be presented through proper channels, not at a public ceremony." Lisa activated the device, and her mother's desperate voice filled the great hall. The recording was scratchy and broken by static, but every word was clear enough to understand. "Colonial Command. This is Director Margaret. Carter reporting from Kepler 442b. The Zephyrian forces have breached our outer defenses. We have approximately 4 hours before they reach the main settlement. Request immediate evacuation for all colonists." There was a pause filled with the sound of explosions in the background. Then another voice responded. A cold, military voice. That made Jake's blood freeze. "Director Carter, this is General Patterson. Evacuation resources are limited. Priority Alpha extraction only. Confirm you understand Priority Alpha protocols." "General, I am requesting full evacuation. We have 300 civilians, including 60 children. They are not military personnel." "Director, your request is denied. Priority Alpha extraction means essential personnel and their immediate families only. In your case, that means the governor's daughter, Lisa Carter. One extraction only." The crowd listened in stunned silence as the recording continued. They heard Margaret Carter pleading for more ships and more time. They heard her describing families hiding in shelters while enemy forces closed in. They heard her final message as the communication center came under attack. "Jake Morrison is a good man following bad orders. Tell him I forgive him. Tell my daughter that her mother loved her enough to make sure she lived. Tell the galaxy that we died as humans should die, together and unafraid." The recording ended with the sound of laser fire and then silence. The Great Hall remained quiet for several long seconds as people absorbed what they had just heard. Jake Morrison, the celebrated hero, had been ordered to save only one person, while leaving hundreds to die. Lisa put the device away and looked around at the shocked faces surrounding her. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter but somehow more powerful. My mother understood what was happening. She knew the military had written off our colony. She knew that Jake Morrison was just following orders. She also knew that following those orders meant abandoning innocent people to slavery and death. Admiral Hayes found his voice first. "These recordings could be fabricated. Anyone can create false evidence with modern technology." Lisa smiled for the first time since approaching Jake. It was not a happy smile. She reached into her other pocket and pulled out a data pad. "I brought shipping manifests from that day, fuel allocation records, communication logs from 3 different military bases. Would you like me to present all of it?" She scrolled through pages of official documents that painted a devastating picture. The military had planned the evacuation of Kepler 442b as a limited operation from the beginning. Only certain people were deemed worth saving. Everyone else was considered an acceptable loss in the larger war effort. Jake finally found his voice. "Lisa, I want you to know that leaving those people was the hardest thing I ever did. Not a day goes by that I do not think about them." "I know," she replied softly. "That is exactly why I am here." The crowd waited for her to continue, but Lisa fell silent. She stood looking at Jake with an expression that was impossible to read. Around them, people whispered and pointed. Camera crews pushed closer, trying to capture every moment of this dramatic confrontation. Ambassador Rodriguez stepped forward again. "Dr. Carter, what exactly do you want from Commander Morrison? Do you want his medal taken away? Do you want him court-martialed?" Lisa shook her head slowly. When she spoke again, her words sent another shock wave through the assembly. "I do not want to destroy Commander Morrison. I want to tell you what he has been doing for the past 20 years. The Great Hall fell completely silent as Lisa Carter prepared to continue her revelation. Jake Morrison stood frozen, watching the woman he had saved 20 years ago. Her words had already destroyed his reputation as a hero, but something in her expression suggested she was not finished. Around them, hundreds of people waited to hear what would come next. "The truth about Kepler 442b is terrible," Lisa said clearly. "But that is not why I came here today. I came because of what Commander Morrison did after he saved me." Confusion rippled through the crowd. Admiral Hayes stepped closer with his brow furrowed. Ambassador Rodriguez looked between Lisa and Jake, trying to understand what was happening. Jake himself felt lost and uncertain about where this conversation was leading. Lisa reached into her jacket again and pulled out another data pad. This one was newer and filled with recent information. "For the past 5 years, I have worked as a xenolinguist studying alien cultures throughout the outer colonies. During that time, I encountered something remarkable. Stories about a mysterious human commander who appeared like a ghost to rescue captured humans from Zephyrian prison camps. She activated the data pad, and holographic images appeared above it. They showed freed prisoners talking to investigators, men and women with haunted eyes describing their rescue from slavery, children who had been born in captivity and never seen the sun until someone came for them. These people all told similar stories," Lisa continued. "A human in unmarked military gear would appear at their prison camps. He never gave his real name. but they called him the Ghost Commander. He would break their chains and lead them to safety. Then he would disappear again, leaving no trace except empty cells. Jake felt his heart beginning to race for a different reason now. He looked around the hall and saw that people were listening intently. Some of the anger on their faces was being replaced by curiosity. "At first, I thought these were just rumors or wishful thinking," Lisa explained. "Desperate people sometimes imagine rescue that never comes, but then I started documenting the stories more carefully. I mapped the locations and dates. I referenced them with military records and shipping manifests. The holographic display changed to show a star map with dozens of red dots marking prison camp locations. Green lines connected them, showing patterns of movement and timing. It was clearly the work of someone with advanced planning and extensive resources. What I discovered was evidence of the most successful rescue operation in galactic history. Someone had been conducting unauthorized missions into Zephyrian space for 20 years. Someone with access to military equipment and intelligence. Someone who knew exactly where to find captured humans. Admiral Hayes interrupted sharply. "Dr. Carter, are you suggesting that Commander Morrison has been conducting illegal operations without authorization?" Lisa turned to look at him directly. "I am not suggesting anything, Admiral. I am stating facts based on 5 years of investigation." She manipulated the holographic display to show more detailed information. Supply records showing military equipment being diverted to unmarked ships. Communication intercepts revealing coded messages about rescue operations. Financial records tracking the movement of funds to support safe houses and refugee care. "The Ghost Commander did not work alone," Lisa continued. "He built a network of sympathetic officers and civilian volunteers, modified cargo ships to look like trading vessels, established safe houses on dozens of worlds, created an entire underground railroad for escaped slaves." Jake found himself unable to speak or move. Lisa was laying out his most carefully guarded secrets in front of hundreds of people. 20 years of covert operations that could have gotten him executed for treason. He had always known this day might come, but he had never imagined it would happen like this. "The operation was incredibly sophisticated," Lisa said, as more evidence appeared in the holographic display. "The Ghost Commander used his official military duties as cover for reconnaissance missions. He attended diplomatic functions to gather intelligence about prison camp locations. He even used media attention from his hero status to create distractions for his rescue teams." Ambassador Rodriguez was staring at Jake with a mixture of shock and something that might have been admiration. "Commander Morrison, are these accusations true?" Jake opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He had spent so many years living 2 lives. The public hero who gave speeches about duty and sacrifice. The secret operative who broke every rule to save people his government had abandoned. He had never expected those 2 lives to collide so dramatically. Lisa continued without waiting for his answer. "I estimate that the Ghost Commander and his network have freed over 15,000 humans from Zephyrian captivity. That is more than 10 times the number saved by all official rescue missions combined." Gasps echoed through the hall as people absorbed this number. 15,000 lives. Entire families reunited. Children who grew up free instead of in chains. It was an achievement that dwarfed any single battle or military campaign. But the most remarkable thing was not the scale of the operation, Lisa said softly. It was the care taken with each individual rescue. The Ghost Commander did not just break people out of prison camps. He made sure they received medical treatment and psychological support. He helped them reconnect with surviving family members. He gave them new identities and safe places to rebuild their lives. The holographic display now showed testimonials from rescued prisoners, their faces filled with gratitude as they described not just being saved, but being healed. The Ghost Commander had understood that freedom meant more than just breaking chains. It meant helping people become whole again. Jake finally found his voice. It came out as barely more than a whisper. "How did you figure it out?" Lisa smiled at him, and for the first time, it was a genuine, warm expression. "The same way I figured out who you really were 20 years ago. You never learned how to lie convincingly, Jake. Every time you gave a speech about the hero of Kepler 442b, I could see the guilt in your eyes. But I also started noticing something else. Hope." She put away the data pad and stepped closer to him. Around them, the crowd watched this intimate moment between the celebrated hero and the woman he had saved as a child. "You carried that guilt with you every day," Lisa continued. "But instead of letting it destroy you, Jake Morrison decided to do something about it. You could not save the people of Kepler 442b, but you spent 20 years making sure no one else would be abandoned the way they were." Tears were running down Jake's face now as 20 years of hidden emotion broke through his carefully maintained composure. He looked at Lisa and saw not the terrified child he remembered, but a brilliant woman who had pieced together the truth about his secret war. "I broke so many rules," he whispered. "I stole military equipment. I falsified reports. I committed treason dozens of times." "Yes, you did," Lisa agreed. "And because of that, 15,000 people are alive and free today, including some who were captured from colonies that official rescue missions had written off as total losses." The hall erupted in voices as people began discussing what they had just learned. Some were angry about the deception. Others were amazed by the scope of the secret rescue operations. But most seemed to be struggling with the same question that had haunted Jake for 20 years. When following orders means abandoning innocent people, what does duty really mean? When the system fails, how far should someone go to do what is right? Lisa Carter had come to this ceremony not to destroy a hero, but to reveal what true heroism looked like. The next 3 days changed everything. Within hours of Lisa Carter's revelation, the Galactic Council announced an emergency investigation into her claims about Commander Jake Morrison's secret rescue operations. News crews from across human space descended on New Geneva Station while military officials tried to control the growing scandal. Commander Betty Walsh arrived on the second day to lead the official inquiry. She was known for her thorough investigations and complete lack of political bias. If anyone could separate truth from fiction in this complicated situation, it would be her. She immediately requested access to all military records dating back 20 years. Jake Morrison found himself confined to quarters while the investigation proceeded. He was not under arrest yet, but he was not free to leave either. Admiral Hayes had made it clear that the scope of these accusations could result in charges of treason if they proved true. The same man who had been celebrated as a hero just days before now faced the possibility of life imprisonment. Lisa Carter became the key witness in the investigation. She spent hours each day presenting evidence to Commander Walsh and her team. The documentation she had gathered over 5 years painted a detailed picture of the most extensive unauthorized military operation in human history. Every rescue mission, every diverted supply shipment, every falsified report that had covered up the secret war against Zephyrian slave camps. The investigation team worked around the clock to verify her claims. They cross-referenced shipping records with fuel allocation reports. They analyzed communication intercepts and compared them to official military logs. They tracked financial transactions that showed how resources had been diverted to fund rescue operations. What they discovered was even more extensive than Lisa had initially revealed. Jake Morrison had not just been conducting rescue missions. He had built an entire shadow military organization dedicated to fighting slavery throughout the galaxy. His network included sympathetic officers on dozens of worlds, modified civilian ships that looked like cargo haulers, and safe houses that could hide rescued prisoners for months while they recovered. Dr. Kevin Park, a military psychologist, was brought in to analyze Morrison's psychological profile. His report painted a picture of a man driven by overwhelming guilt to perform acts of extraordinary courage. The trauma of leaving colonists to die on Kepler 442b had created a compulsive need to save others. For 20 years, Morrison had been fighting a private war against the system that had forced him to abandon innocent people. The subject displays classic symptoms of survivor guilt combined with an unusual capacity for sustained covert action, Park wrote in his assessment. Rather than seeking therapy or official channels for his trauma, he chose to address it through direct action. The scope and success of his operations suggest remarkable organizational skills and unwavering moral commitment. Meanwhile, public opinion across human space was divided. Protests broke out on several worlds, with citizens demanding Morrison's immediate pardon and recognition for his true service. They carried signs reading, "Free the Ghost Commander" and "Heroes Break Bad Rules." Counter-protesters argued that military discipline required following orders even when those orders were morally questionable. The investigation revealed uncomfortable truths about official military policy regarding rescue operations. Internal documents showed that commanders had been instructed to prioritize strategic objectives over individual lives. Colonies like Kepler 442b were considered acceptable losses if saving them would require too many resources. The same cold calculation that had doomed 300 people was still being used to make decisions about human lives. Admiral Hayes found himself under scrutiny as evidence emerged that he had known about Morrison's activities but chosen to look the other way. Intelligence reports showed that Hayes had received suspicious information about Morrison's training exercises near the Zephyrian border. Supply officers had flagged unusual equipment requests that Hayes had approved without investigation. "I suspected Jake was doing something beyond his official duties," Hayes admitted during his testimony. But his public service record was exemplary, and the results spoke for themselves. Mysterious prison camp failures were reducing Zephyrian slave-taking operations. Sometimes it is better not to ask too many questions about why good things are happening. The most powerful evidence came from the rescued prisoners themselves. Commander Walsh's team located dozens of people who had been freed by Morrison's network over the years. Their testimonies painted a picture of systematic torture and abuse in Zephyrian prison camps. They described children born into slavery, who had never seen sunlight until the Ghost Commander came for them. Marcus Stone had been captured during a raid on his merchant ship 15 years earlier. He spent 3 years in a labor camp before Morrison's team broke him out. "The Ghost Commander did not just rescue us," he testified. "He stayed with us for weeks afterward, helping us recover from what we had endured. He arranged medical treatment and therapy. He helped me find my surviving family members and get back on my feet." Sarah Webb had been taken as a child from a border colony. She grew up in captivity until Morrison rescued her at age 16. "He taught me that being human meant never giving up on each other," she said through tears. He showed me that someone would always come for us no matter how long it took or how dangerous it was. The investigation also revealed the true cost of Morrison's operations. He had funded rescue missions by selling military equipment on the black market. He had manipulated supply chains to divert resources to his network. He had falsified dozens of reports to cover his tracks. By any legal definition, he had committed treason on a massive scale. But the investigation also showed the results of those crimes. Detailed records proved that Morrison's network had freed over 15,000 humans from slavery. They had disrupted Zephyrian prison camp operations so effectively that slave raids became economically unsustainable. Several Zephyrian commanders had defected to join the rescue operations after witnessing human dedication to saving each other. Commander Walsh spent long hours reviewing all the evidence. Her final report would determine whether Jake Morrison was prosecuted as a traitor or recognized as a hero. The decision would also set a precedent for how humanity dealt with conflicts between legal duty and moral obligation. Lisa Carter requested a private meeting with Commander Walsh on the final day of investigation. She brought one last piece of evidence that she had kept for this moment. It was a recording device that Morrison had left at every rescue site. He had never intended for these recordings to be heard by anyone, but he had made them anyway. Takara. Recordings revealed Morrison talking to terrified prisoners during rescue operations. His voice was gentle and patient as he explained that they were safe now. He promised them that humanity never abandoned its own people. He told them they were going home. What made the recordings remarkable was not just what Morrison said, but how he said it. Despite knowing that his promise was built on a lie, he spoke with absolute conviction. He made that promise true through force of will, Lisa told Commander Walsh. Jake Morrison could not save the people of Kepler 442b, but he spent 20 years proving that humanity would never abandon anyone again. He turned his greatest failure into our greatest strength. As the investigation concluded, news arrived that would change everything. A Zephyrian delegation had requested permission to address the Galactic Council. They wanted to testify about the impact of Morrison's rescue operations on their own society. Former enemies were coming forward to speak on behalf of the man who had spent 20 years fighting them. The final hearing took place in the same great hall where Lisa Carter had first revealed the truth about Jake Morrison. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of a celebration, there was tension and uncertainty. Representatives from dozens of worlds had come to witness the conclusion of the most controversial military investigation in human history. Jake Morrison stood before a tribunal of 3 judges, 1 human, 1 alien ally, and 1 neutral observer from the Galactic Council. Behind him sat hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by his secret war against slavery. Former prisoners, their families, and the officers who had helped him conduct rescue operations for 20 years. Commander Betty Walsh presented her investigation findings to the tribunal. Her report was thorough and devastating. Morrison had technically committed dozens of crimes, including theft of military property, falsification of official records, and unauthorized military operations in foreign space. Under standard military law, he should face life imprisonment or execution. But Walsh also presented evidence of the results of those crimes. 15,000 freed slaves, dozens of prison camps shut down, an entire underground network that had made slavery economically impossible for the Zephyrian Empire. The scope of Morrison's achievement was unprecedented in galactic history. The accused clearly violated military law on numerous occasions. Walsh testified. However, the humanitarian impact of those violations raises questions about the adequacy of existing legal frameworks when dealing with systematic atrocities. The first witnesses were former prisoners who Morrison had rescued over the years. One by one, they stood to describe their experiences in Zephyrian prison camps and their eventual freedom. Their testimonies painted a picture of systematic torture and abuse that official rescue operations had been unable to address. Mary Johnson had been captured with her 2 young children during a border raid. She spent 4 years in a labor camp watching other prisoners die from overwork and maltreatment. Morrison's team rescued her family in a daring night raid that freed over 200 people. Commander Morrison did not just save our lives, she testified. He gave us back our humanity. In the prison camps, we were treated like animals. The Ghost Commander reminded us that we were people who deserved freedom and dignity. The most powerful testimony came from children who had been born in captivity. They had grown up believing that slavery was normal until Morrison showed them another way to live. Several of them had gone on to become doctors, teachers, and engineers, contributing to society in ways that would have been impossible if they had remained enslaved. Then came an unexpected witness. A former Zephyrian commander named Kelth entered the hall under heavy security. His presence caused murmurs of shock throughout the audience. Former enemies rarely testified in human courts, especially about sensitive military matters. Kelth spoke through a translator device that converted his clicking speech into human words. I commanded prison facilities in Sector 7 for 12 years. During that time, the Ghost Commander disrupted 43 of my operations. He cost my government millions of credits in lost labor and security expenses. The prosecutor seemed pleased with this testimony until Kelth continued speaking. The Ghost Commander also showed me something I had never seen before. Humans who would risk everything to save people they had never met. Soldiers who broke their own laws because those laws were wrong. After witnessing such dedication to protecting the innocent, I could no longer participate in slavery operations. Kelth explained that Morrison's rescue missions had not just freed prisoners. They had convinced several Zephyrian officers that human concepts of morality were superior to their own cultural practices. He and 6 other commanders had defected to join the rescue network, providing intelligence about prison camp operations. The Ghost Commander won a war that your official military could not win, Kelth testified. He did it not through superior weapons, but through moral example. His actions proved that humans value individual lives over strategic objectives. This made slavery operations too costly and dangerous to continue. Ambassador Rodriguez took the stand to address the broader implications of Morrison's actions. She argued that his methods should become the foundation for official policy rather than being treated as criminal activity. Commander Morrison's approach represents the best of human values, she testified. He proved that we will break our own laws rather than abandon innocent people to suffering. This principle should guide all our future interactions with other species. The tribunal also heard from Admiral Hayes, who admitted his knowledge of Morrison's operations. Rather than disciplining his subordinate, Hayes had provided unofficial support because he believed the mission was morally necessary, even if legally questionable. Military regulations exist to maintain order and discipline, Hayes testified, but when those regulations conflict with basic human decency, exceptional individuals must be willing to break them. Jake Morrison is such an individual. Lisa Carter provided the final testimony for the defense. She presented evidence showing how Morrison's rescue network had evolved into a galaxy-wide organization dedicated to fighting oppression. Safe houses on dozens of worlds, medical facilities for trauma recovery, educational programs for freed slaves. It was a humanitarian infrastructure that rivaled official government programs. Jake Morrison carries the guilt of 300 people. He could not save, Lisa testified, but he channeled that guilt into saving 15,000 others. He transformed his greatest failure into humanity's greatest achievement. The prosecutor argued that good results did not justify criminal methods. Military discipline required following orders, even when those orders seemed morally wrong. If every officer decided for themselves which laws to obey, then military organizations would collapse into chaos. But the defense countered that some moral obligations transcended legal requirements. When official channels failed to protect innocent lives, individuals had a duty to act. Morrison's rescue operations had succeeded precisely because they operated outside normal military constraints. The tribunal deliberated for 2 days while protesters gathered outside New Geneva Station. Some demanded Morrison's execution for treason. Others called for his immediate pardon and promotion. The decision would set precedents that would influence military law throughout human space. When the judges returned, their verdict sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Morrison's technical crimes were pardoned in recognition of his humanitarian service. More importantly, his rescue methods would become the foundation for a new galactic rescue protocol, establishing the principle that no sentient being should be abandoned to slavery or oppression. The tribunal also announced the creation of the Morrison Foundation, dedicated to continuing rescue operations through official channels. Lisa Carter would serve as its first director with full authority to coordinate humanitarian missions across human space. As the hearing concluded, Morrison approached Lisa with words he had carried for 20 years. "I am sorry I could not save them all." Her response became legendary throughout human space. "You taught us all how to save each other." The story ended with scenes of Morrison training the next generation of rescue specialists. No longer hiding his work, he was teaching others to carry it forward. His legend had evolved from that of a lone hero following orders to something greater. Proof that humanity's greatest strength lay not in superior technology,